This week, national parks reopen after the government shutdown, but not before one of them gets hit with a rash of graffiti. Winter closures are rolling in across the park system, including some big changes at Yellowstone and the Grand Canyon. The Park Service is trying to hire 500 new law enforcement rangers with an eye popping $70,000 bonus, while a new academic study shows national parks are still some of the safest places you can visit. We'll also look at the Justice Department's renewed crackdown on marijuana use on federal land, the controversy surrounding the nominee to lead the Bureau of Land Management, plus a presidential pardon for a record setting trail runner, and the unbelievable moment a man walked straight toward a pack of wolves in Yellowstone. All that coming up. I'm Jason Epperson. This is Parkography, and it's time for the latest in national park and public lands news. Welcome back, everybody. First up, the National Park Service has officially reopened hundreds of national parks and recreation sites now that the government shutdown has ended. Most outdoor spaces remained open, but most buildings did not. Park officials say crews are working quickly to restore normal operations and welcome visitors back. With parks reopening, travelers can once again make advance reservations for permits, campsites, tours, and other activities. Tours at sites like Mammoth Cave are back online, for instance. Several of you let me know after the episode I put out last week on national park passes that the USGS.gov portal that sells park passes online was down. It is now back up and running now that the shutdown has ended. There wasn't as much illegal behavior and vandalism throughout the shutdown as there was during the last one, but there are reports of graffiti at one of the nation's most delicate national parks. Arches National Park remained open during the shutdown, but with only a skeleton crew and reduced services. SF Gate visited the park on November 12th and documented a dozen cases of spray painted and carved graffiti along the Devil's Garden Trail, including white handprints, smiley faces, the word grug, and even a character from the game Among Us. The paint was first spotted on November 5th by a retired National Park Service employee who said it looked freshly applied. When SF Gate returned more than a week later, the graffiti was still there, along with new carvings in the surrounding sandstone. The bright white markings are clearly visible from the main trail. At 43 days, the shutdown was the longest in U.S. history, and things may be getting back to normal now. But this could all happen again very soon. The funding agreement expires at the end of January, when Congress will face the same spending challenge. Though facilities are reopening, it is that time of year when we see lots of seasonal closures at parks. Most roads at Yellowstone are now closed to prepare for commercially guided snow coach and snowmobile travel during the winter season, which will begin December 15th, weather permitting. The road between the north and northeast entrances is the only road open year-round to regular vehicles at Yellowstone. And on that road, the new Yellowstone River Bridge crossing the Yellowstone River near Tower Junction has opened, funded by the Great American Outdoors Act. The project is moving into its final phase as crews continue to work on overlooks, remove the old bridge, and restore the Lost Creek drainage. The full project is expected to be completed sometime next year. On Friday, Trail Ridge Road, which traverses Rocky Mountain National Park, officially closed to through travel for the winter season. It was actually open later than normal. Trail Ridge Road normally closes in mid-October and opens to through travel during the last week in May, weather permitting. But Grand Canyon National Park has closed the North Rim early, also last Friday. The North Rim had reopened to visitors with limited access to eastern viewpoints following an extended closure caused by the Dragon Bravo fire. The area was tentatively scheduled to remain open through November 30th. However, forecasts called for winter weather and snowfall over the course of last weekend, and the park was concerned about unsafe travel and work environments in an area still recovering from post-fire hazards. The North Rim is by far the less popular part of the park. The South Rim, which is easily accessible from I-40, contains most visitor services and remains open throughout the winter. More in a moment, but first, this episode is sponsored by Slinky Stove. Slinky Stove is the patented collapsible fire pit that stays intact when packed. It's perfect for RVs and car camping or in your own backyard. It sets up in seconds, providing you with smokeless airflow rings and a clean burning fire. No more dancing around campfire smoke. Inexpensive and packed with extras, the Slinky Stove offers a 3-level cooking system that gives you flexibility, whether it's morning coffee or evening campfire chili. And with contained ash, cleanup's quick, just the way it should be on public lands. Order yours now at slinkystove.com or click the link in the description. The National Park Service is launching a nationwide effort to recruit up to 500 law enforcement officers. And in order to expedite the process, they're offering a $70,000 hiring bonus for highly qualified and experienced law enforcement professionals. Quote, America's national parks deserve the very best public servants working to keep them safe, said Frank Lands, National Park Service Deputy Director for Operations. That's a very appropriate name. We are looking for experienced officers who are ready to step up into one of the most unique and rewarding law enforcement roles in the federal government. These officers will help protect irreplaceable resources, support our park communities, and ensure millions of visitors can enjoy their national parks safely. National Park law enforcement rangers are uniformed federal law enforcement officers with the authority to enforce federal laws within National Park Service sites, and there are currently about 1,300 sworn officers. Law enforcement ranger recruitment and retention has been a serious problem for many years. Positions declined by 48% between 2010 and 2023. The high cost of living in national park gateway communities, job competition from state and local agencies, and low overall morale among National Park Service employees are all contributing factors. So it will be interesting to see if the Interior Department can convince more law enforcement officers to join the Park Service with the bonus, though I do hear that the applications actually are reaching their limit already. If they can, don't expect to see all of those new rangers in parks across the country. About 60% of those positions are designated for just 3 cities: Washington, D.C., New York City, and San Francisco, increasing the federal police force in those cities at a time when the Trump administration is utilizing federally controlled forces extensively on U.S. soil, with heightened tensions over National Guard troop deployments and immigration enforcement actions. National Park Service sites are sometimes locations of protests in these cities, the National Mall in D.C. in particular, but they are also 3 cities with just very busy and popular National Park Service sites like the Statue of Liberty, the Golden Gate Bridge, and the Lincoln Memorial. 300 officers would be deployed to those 3 cities, while 200 would be assigned across a wide range of national parks across the country. A new academic study from criminology and criminal justice researchers shows that national parks remain overwhelmingly safe spaces, with fewer than 1% of visitors receiving any kind of citation between 2000 and 2023. Most of those were simple traffic issues. The researchers analyzed citation data from Badlands, Everglades, Shenandoah, and Yosemite to understand how low-level disorder, things like illegal parking, camping violations, or resource damage, shows up in parks as visitation grows. Their findings show that incidents have remained remarkably stable for more than 2 decades, even as millions more people visit each year. Yosemite had the highest overall citation numbers simply because it sees far more visitors, while Everglades stood out for having more natural resource-related violations, likely due to its proximity to major metro areas and the sensitivity of its wildlife. The authors say that early intervention, better signage, education, and strong ranger presence are key to keeping problems low, something that's harder today with staffing levels down across the Park Service. If you want the full breakdown and interviews with the researchers, I'll link to an excellent article from our friends over at National Parks Traveler in the description. A new Justice Department policy is putting renewed focus on the enforcement of laws surrounding the possession of cannabis on federal land. The U.S. Attorney for the Wyoming District, Darren Smith, says the policy reverses late Biden-era guidance that had significantly reduced federal prosecution of low-level marijuana cases. Even in states where possession is legal, the key issue here is federal jurisdiction. National parks, national forests, BLM land, anywhere patrolled by federal officers all fall under federal drug law, which still classifies cannabis as a Schedule I substance. That said, legalization advocates say there really wasn't much of a reduction in enforcement over the Biden era in places like national parks, and President Donald Trump has signaled a willingness to reclassify cannabis as a less dangerous drug. Trump's pick to lead the Bureau of Land Management is raising alarm among conservation groups. The former New Mexico Congressman Steve Pearce has a long record of trying to shrink or sell off public lands, yet he's now being nominated to run the agency that oversees 245 million acres of them, or about 10% of the total surface area of the United States, almost entirely within 12 western states and Alaska. Pierce has repeatedly pushed for privatizing federal land over the years. He criticized what he called Teddy Roosevelt's big ideas about national parks, supported selling public land to expand oil and gas drilling, and backed legislation aimed at disposing of federal acreage or shrinking national monuments. He also has deep ties to the oil industry, having owned multiple oil field service companies. Environmental groups say that the nomination is a direct threat to America's public lands. The Sierra Club called Pierce a climate change denier and an ally of the oil and gas industry, while the Center for Western Priorities said his career has been focused on blocking access to public land and weakening protections. Ranching groups, however, support the move, saying Pierce understands their concerns on grazing and land access. Pierce's nomination will go before the U.S. Senate for confirmation, with a hearing date still to come. Democratic Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer visited Saratoga National Historical Park on Monday, urging Congress to restore federal funding for national parks after the expiration of the Legacy Restoration Fund at the end of September. That fund had provided critical maintenance dollars to all 433 national parks. Schumer warned that despite past investments, Saratoga still faces a $14 million maintenance backlog, a major concern as the park prepares for America's 250th anniversary. He called on lawmakers to pass the America the Beautiful Act, which would pump an additional $2 billion a year into national parks nationwide. Quote, "This is our heritage, this is our history," Schumer said, stressing that protecting park infrastructure preserves both tourism and education for future generations. Saratoga National Historical Park draws more than 100,000 visitors each year. Superintendent Leslie Morlock said renewing funding would be essential for restoring aging structures, including the Saratoga Monument, and ensuring the park can continue sharing its Revolutionary War story with the public. President Trump has issued a pardon for trail runner Michelino Sinceri, who set a record for running up and down Grand Teton last year, but was charged by the Park Service for cutting a switchback using an informal worn path that's not part of the official trail. Sinceri completed the 13.3-mile round trip with 7,000 feet of elevation gain in just 2 hours and 50 minutes, but the off-trail shortcut resulted in a misdemeanor conviction. Prosecutors had agreed to drop the charge if Sinceri completed community service and a wilderness stewardship course, but the judge questioned the deal. Trump's pardon now ends the case entirely in what many considered a case of severe government overreach. And finally, a wild scene at Yellowstone National Park is going viral after a man walked towards a pack of wolves, coming within just a few feet of the animals as stunned visitors looked on. The incident happened on October 6th when 5 black wolves were spotted near an open field. At first, the man backed away, but as the wolves approached and began to circle, he actually advanced toward them, waving something in his hand. Bystanders shouted for him to retreat, and at one point, he appeared to fire a burst of bear spray. The wolves kept moving toward him until the group, including the man, disappeared over a ravine, leaving onlookers convinced they were watching a fatal mauling. But the wolves eventually backed off, and the man reemerged, acting erratically, prompting speculation he may have been under the influence of drugs or alcohol. In reality, he probably wasn't in much danger. The wolves were probably just curious, but Yellowstone regulations require you stay 100 yards from animals like wolves at all times. That's it for this week's National Park and Public Lands News Roundup. We're off next week for Thanksgiving. We hope you have a happy one if you celebrate. If you got something out of this episode, we hope you'll subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Bye, everybody.